No, the Mighty Peace Watershed Alliance is a not-for-profit that works together with everyone on the landscape to do water management. So if you're a producer, if you're oil and gas, if you're forestry, if you're a municipality, we partner with people to look at how we can better manage water. And I just want to say the discussions and what I heard this morning, it was great. Set things up for what I hope you can take away from this. I'm a bit like Brian, the guy who just spoke. I'm not a producer. I look at this landscape, I look at water from a bird's eye view across watersheds, across municipalities. So hopefully I can share some of that. And I'm just going to give you a snippet of some of the things we're involved in. And you guys can tell me how we should do it better. So usually when I get the chance to work with someone, it's because they've had an issue that we tend to refer to as erosion. You walk out onto your field, 10 feet of it is missing. You go to the shed, the corner's gone. Sometimes people contact us. And so we go and we look at that. And the first thing we have to understand is that this issue is a complex process. It is interactions between water, landscape, and soil. So it's not just the water itself, it's the landscape. So Brian did a good job setting up landscape, but how that water moves across it, if it gets pooled, if it moves into the groundwater portion. The soil, is it compacted? Is it porous? Can it percolate? What's happening? Is there stubble on there? We heard that from a bunch of producers earlier this morning. What is happening? And those three things are going to determine what happens when we get to erosion. So the first thing we do when we get out there and somebody wants to work with us, we back up. They know their field, like I would never will. They know the issue. I like to back up to the watershed scale and try to figure out what's going on. To do that, we have to understand land use, or everything that people upstream of them are doing there and how that's affecting water. So this is one of our projects up in Mackenzie County. And so this is what we do first. We delineate the watershed, meaning everything in that blue line where the rain falls, where the snow falls, it's going to end up at the pour point, the end of the watershed, which is for this one right here. So we know, okay, that's what it looks like. And essentially, not too surprising, it's mostly cropland. There are some hills here with some forest cover where a lot of the water comes from. Okay, so we have a sense. We're looking at a small watershed, a lot of cropland. We can zoom in and start to see some other things. Just so you know, the end of this watershed where we calculate everything is at this little dot. And it's interesting, if you notice a few places, somebody has been using their D8. So they're very handy machines and have a proper place. What it does is this has been straightened, right? You can see this is what a river or a creek looks like. This sinuosity, this back and forth, is slowing down water and taking away erosive power. This straightened stuff is very good, and heard a bunch of guys talk about this morning. In 48 hours, your snow melt is gone. But it means it's going with the pressure of a fire hydrant, which gives you then, as in our background, you can see somebody's losing soil. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Then we move on to the next layer. So that's the landscape. What about the water? So this is what we like to just mock up as our hydrology. Where are the channels? Where are the pools? And you can see it's pretty straightforward. And we know most of this water is going to be coming from these hills down here, but there are still a few wetlands in there. And these are really good. They're sinks. They sort of slow down the floods. They slow down the droughts. They're a sponge, right? So we're looking at this, and you're going to see this is the edge of this watershed. But that's not actually where this erosion happened. The erosion happened 1.5 miles north of that. So water not only went a ways up this way where it doesn't normally go, it was going with such force, it went uphill or just dug through the hill. So these guys, their water, they normally flow into here because this field's right here. Their water would normally go this way. But we had been changing so much on the landscape. We had been getting the water to go so fast off that landscape, it hit this point, and there was a bridge here, backed up, and it shot uphill, ripped through the hill, and then ripped through that guy's field. So maybe that was just a freak year, right? Maybe that was just one flood year. Well, when we look at the hydrograph, it wasn't. This was the year that it happened. And if you go back 30 years, there's 4 or 5 times there's been that much flow. It hasn't happened before. And we can go back in those aerial photos and we can see this increasing clearing of land. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but we should maybe think about where we clear and how much and to what extent we clear. And of course, the increased drainage of wetlands definitely contribute to this. So we can go take a aerial look at what did we end up doing. So we had a channel that we had to deal with. And this is actually after the work has happened. But when we work with people, and we're always invited in, this is, I can't come and tell you how to do things. We talk about practices that we think are helpful for reducing erosion. And again, this morning was excellent. I can't say enough. I heard things about stubble, cover crops. I heard things about potentially barriers or borders. That's maybe not a common practice here. And if you can see, we had talked to at least have to stay out of the water course. And, I don't know if this is on purpose or accident, 80-foot header or whatever is going on there. As soon as you start doing that, that soil has been loosened up. It's the weak spot. That's where the erosion starts to go, right? There's no vegetation there, no roots to hold that soil together. That's going to be our next project probably, right? So when we end up dealing with this, we've looked back at the watershed. There's 200 tons of dirt or whatever it is missing there. We're not going to go fill that in, right? So we've tried to change this into a water course that won't erode into the field. So I'm an ecologist. I would love to see this channel be all squiggly, like I showed you on the map. But that doesn't always work, right? There's a field there. Somebody needs to make a living. So we did end up going with a fairly straight channel, but we have what we call baffles. And these are speed bumps for water. And it works a bit like going side by side because when they come there, they start to build a pool, and water slows down, it drops sediment, and then doesn't have as much erosive power. But that built up sediment slowly builds up over the years, and we changed the grade. We changed the angle of the slope or the hill for the water, so it's not going as fast. It doesn't erode as much. And then we just go in and we plug it full of anything with roots. So there are native grasses here, some wheatgrass and some foul manna, and then we did some plug planting, so seedlings, put them in with shovels. And then we grabbed a bunch of grade 6 kids, put them on a bus, drug them out here, and had them put in live stakes. So this just grows up and it's a mess. It's not going to look neat and tidy. We tell people and we try to avoid aspen, things that'll fall onto the field. It's going to be a messy willow copse. And that's perfect. It's going to provide resistance to that water and slow it down. So hopefully we don't have more erosion. And of course, just to let you know, we do go back and check on these things. We have pretty good establishment rates. This site was 92%. But yeah, we see a lot of good growth here. So this is something that works. So when we do this restoration thing, we like to zoom back and you can see the whole watershed, right? Here's the Blue Hills, Buffalo Head Hills. Water comes down and you can see that land use can really dictate what's there. And all the discussion we've had today, like I said, I've been so impressed that we've touched on all these things. People understand how water moves. We know that when we have 2 mild fields, there's a chance for a very, very quick runoff with a lot of force, right? So something to be careful about. And the challenging part here is we like to work in partnership with people. So the first thing we did when this happened, so this is where it eroded, we started talking to neighbor A, neighbor B, and neighbor C. Unfortunately, neighbors weren't interested. So it's limited in what we can do, because as I mentioned, that water at any given point is really determined by what's upstream of it. So we tried to engage them, that didn't work, so we did what we could with this landowner. So water, soil, land use, they work together. Any guesses where I'm headed? I wish. Close. Evolutionary neuroscience. So I don't know if any of you guys have a passion about reading up on stuff like this, but the theory is for those people who are trying to recreate how our brain got to be how it is, like to think about this. This is a great exercise. How come there's one species on this planet that is so good at thinking in 3-dimensional time space? There's only one of us. We've seen some of the other like chimpanzees and stuff. They can do pretty well in 2, like so past and present. People, as far as we can understand, are the only ones who think in three: past, present, and future. And future is something pretty crazy if you think about it. It's creating something, it's creativity. We can think about something that doesn't exist yet. We can create in our mind different possible outcomes. Meaning we don't just have to react to what's happened, but what is coming. And the theory is, and I'm not an evolutionary neuroscience, but the theory is we had to do this because we stopped gathering in the grasslands, and we stopped trying to eat just little birds and rabbits. We started chasing things really big. So one, we needed to communicate with each other, and two, we had to start thinking about this, like, what if he goes this way, that way, we're gonna die, or can we run him up against a swamp, and then we can get our spears into him, or off a cliff. And so all of a sudden, there are new possibilities. So, as I mentioned, I'm actually with a watershed planning and advisory council. So we do a lot of advising work, and that tends to be this: oh, I've got an issue. Would you like to work with us? And we say, okay, we can try. The other part of it is to be proactive. So we try to envision a future, and we try to figure out steps to get there. And we call that a couple of different things, but the one I'd like to talk to you a bit about is source water protection plan. And Brian mentioned this with the Grimshaw, and this is a fascinating place. So this is Griffin Creek. This is the spring. It comes out of the ground. It's a stream like that. Anyhow, really interesting. We went around looking at all this, and we started doing this proactive planning to protect this source of water. Just as a reminder, and Brian's already talked, so I guess I don't need to do much on this, but an aquifer or groundwater is water between particles in the soil. The little air spaces in there, that's what it fills up. And then your surface water is what's up above on lakes, ponds, wetlands, rivers, and it's sitting up on top there, right? And of course, there's some movement depending on it. And then you have this sort of other area where there's soil and there's moisture in there, but it's not groundwater per se, right? It's soil moisture. Anyhow, that's what we're looking at. There's an aquifer here. We're sitting on top of it right now. Excellent quality. And we're trying to think, how do we protect it? Thoughts? We do something we like to call risk assessment. And it's very simple. One, we ask, what could possibly go wrong? And then two, we ask, how bad would it be if it does go wrong? So, and these are questions that are relatively easy to answer once you get people together. And what, is this really bad? Is this sort of bad? Is this little bad? Is this okay? And so you start to have to do this ranking thing, right? And that's our process. And we don't do that alone. Like I said, we engage with the people who are there. So there's a bunch of municipalities around here, and they've come together, formed the Grimshaw Gravels Aquifer Management Advisory Association. And they've been very engaged in trying to do this. So it's been great. As well, we got the government people to come in and join, and we sat down and we asked that question: what could go wrong? And how bad would it be if it does go wrong? And the first way to do this is, again, we're watershed people. We like to zoom way out. So we looked at the landscape and what are the potential hazards? And so a couple of things we noted. There's very little cover here in some places, right? There's just a couple of feet of soil on top of this aquifer. And it's not necessarily heavy clay, it's porous, meaning things can easily go in the aquifer. Another thing, there are a lot of wells up here. That's a direct hole into that aquifer, right? So potentially, if there's a spill or a contaminant, it could go into the aquifer. So we looked at that. And we end up doing a lot of these really fun maps, if you're into maps. But we identified everything, right? So there's gravel pits, there are waste transfer stations, there are wastewater outfalls, there are roads, there are pipelines. We looked at these things and then just said, okay, here is this potential hazard, here's the aquifer, how is it got to get from here to here? How likely is that? And we came up with our risk assessment. And we didn't stop there. We've already created this potential future scenario where we're going to have contamination in the aquifer. So we thought, okay, can we come up with a way to prevent that from happening? And that's what this is. So I'm not going to show you the whole thing, but I will just quickly touch on the top two things we identified: gravel pits and livestock operations, confined feeding. So gravel pits, pretty obvious, right? You have a big hole, there's an aquifer right into the aquifer, something spills and you have diesel engines down there, could be bad. And again, these municipalities we work with have been excellent. They've updated their bylaws, they've increased the oversight here. They have done a great job of reducing that risk. Okay, so on to the next one, livestock operations. So, we had a couple of ideas around this, and really we're looking at confined feeding operations first because high concentration of manure, and all of a sudden you have a potential contaminant. So this one we've been working on a little bit more and trying to connect with people like yourselves and saying, you're the ones do this. How do you best do this? How do you manage manure? How do you know where the runoff is going? How do you save that as a resource? I heard today about how important that is on your field to maintain crop yields. So this is some of those things we like to do, and we can't do this. I'm not a farmer, like I said. We like to engage with folks like yourself doing this, and how can we do this better and think about, okay, this is good for my farm, and this reduces the risk to the aquifer. The other one we farther down the list, but it was farm water management. There's things like, how do we store water on the farm, dugouts? How do we get water off the fields in time? How do we, and looking at how people change their farm landscape to have control of the water there. So again, this is something we like to work with producers on. So if any of these things really tickles you, come talk to me and maybe we can do a project together. So this leaves us to, the waiver, the qualifying statement. Predictions are difficult, particularly about the future. So we've tried to make guesstimates, estimates, or something about the future. We don't know if that's going to happen, so we're trying to reduce risk. But things can change, particularly because our predictions are based on the past, based on how much rain we had previously. It's how water flowed previously. It's how, landscape was previously, right? We go back to our past, think about that, and then say, okay, this is where it's going to go. Things are changing. We know that. There's a lot more activity on the landscape. There's changes in our weather patterns. So we know we have to be careful here. Okay, back to, just engaging with people and going out on the land and doing stuff. Sometimes things get catastrophic. And so I'm going to show you the Bear River, and this is the main channel going off to the right. This here is, or was, the bank of the main channel of the Bear River back in 2018. And we're going to show you something called an avulsion, when the river decides it's going to go somewhere else. Cut itself a new channel, and it flowed through here. This poor producer lost, several hundred tons of prime soil. You can see this is a rich field. Look at the soil. 50 plus acres he could not use. It's a big thing, right? And this happened, I can explain it, going back up the watershed, changes in watershed. Water is coming off faster. People are draining it. We are compressing that river. There are no floodplains, things like that. But what do you do with that then? Well, he wanted us to block it up. I said, okay, we could think about that, but before I'm willing to do something that crazy, I gotta look at this a bit more. So we went and did some modeling, and this is where that avulsion happened, where the new channel went in. And so we had to survey the river and build this computer model, and then we said, let's make it rain and see what happens. And we ended up with roughly, this flow is not quite as high as what caused the 28 thing, but getting up there, these high flows, and this is blocked, so we're not allowing any water right here. What happens? Oh, it punches out here, and you're going to see, we're not, sure there's not as much going down here, but we're going to rip new holes. This whole system has changed so much, that water comes so quickly, it's going to punch out somewhere. It's going to be the weakest spot where there is the least riparian vegetation, maybe just where there is, like I said, someone accidentally went too far on the bank, it loosened it up, there's no roots there, whatever. Something is going to cause it to punch through. So I said, okay, well, what happens if we leave that channel open and in fact we widen it? And then of course he said, well, take a hike? No, he wasn't that bad. He's like, come again? You want me to widen the channel? I said, yeah. And so what we proposed was widening this, and it's quite a bit bigger here. And just so you know, this is obviously water, but the color is the speed of the water. And so we modeled how quickly is this water going to be moving. So the brighter yellow is faster, and this lighter color, fainter, is slower. And so we were able to say, this is what we think will happen. Again, predictions are difficult. We think this is how it's going to happen. We can spread this out. If you want to think about it, we're going to put a big water cushion to this on rushing wall of water. It's going to have to push into that cushion and then through, right? And so, yeah. And he said, okay, we'll try it. He wasn't sure. So, and not only did we do this, we went a step further. It doesn't look like much. I need to get out and get some better photos. We put in a wattle fence. And this is essentially that live staking. You take willows or poplars and you drive them in, and then we weave them together. And this is a mess now. This is a bit of an older photo, but it looks like this now. What we wanted. It is a mess. It's a wall. So that water comes, and yeah, it goes past it, but it goes a tenth of the speed. It's dropping sediment, meaning that every year we're seeing this come up a bit higher. Will we ever completely close that? I don't know. And this is a long-term process, but it does mean there is water continuing down towards his field, but it's not like it was before. Like, it's a lot slower. So there are options of working together when we understand landscape, water, soil. This is a different one. Yeah, and again, yeah, different issues, but this one was interesting because, you know, he recognized I can't get across the other side of my field to seed, harvest, do anything. That's a problem, right? But the next thing, you know, and I'm hearing that today, people are aware of this. He was noticing things with his crops. The water table drops substantially when you do this. You know, I can't remember, over a course of a couple of years, this dropped 8 feet. Water, as you know, is determined by gravity, right? So this water table used to come right across here. So summer, his crops had water, right? Now, as we get closer to the gully, it starts to just drop, meaning there's less and less moisture in his soil come late summer. So we're trying something here, and again, this is a long-term. We've been measuring it, getting some success, but we're trying to raise that channel, and it's a series of baffles in there, and you know, having that stream meander, and then we raise it up with rocks, and then also vegetation in there. It seems like it's working. We run into Graham Powell, ask him about it. We think long-term, we're going to get where we need to go, but these are big issues, right? And then again, we do simple things like thinking about moving cattle. And this is something you've probably all come up with, a crossing of sorts. I've seen some folks in the back who let us work with them on the first crossing we did. This is a different one. And this is such a great thing because it's difficult to move livestock through water. It's not good for the water course, not good for the soil. And these construction things can go very quickly. You know, we can help people get a permit. We know how to do that permitting process and makes it easy. And we build these much as we can out of scrap. It's getting tougher. We don't find as much oil field pipe laying around, but a few of those, a rig mat, some panels, you're good. Especially if you know how to weld, this can be very cheap. But again, we're watershed people. So looking at this issue, and we said, we've also got some ideas. If we're going to think about getting cows from winter to summer pasture, so winter pasture near the house, summer pasture started up here, maybe we should think bigger too. This whole system, this is a river system. And he was very open and yeah, let us fence this all out. So this, like all of our projects, the landowner's very involved, but we had other organizations like Cows and Fish and Alberta Conservation Association, the County Grand Prairie in on this. And so we did all this fencing out for him, and that crossing went in, and yeah, he's been very happy. So it's good to look at this landscape level and put all the pieces together. And this is to set up for Corey. I've had this thought, and I'm not a farmer, but I've heard a lot about this variable rate farming. You know your field so well that you're applying seed or fertilizer or whatever it is at different rates across the field. Brilliant. Makes sense. I mean, we have big fields, they're going to change. So my thought is, could you do that with wetlands? Could you spend more time identifying wetlands, low spots that are maintaining your moisture, that would help reduce runoff and flooding downstream, give you some more soil moisture in summer, and really lay out fields, yeah, for wetlands? And I don't know, you have to tell me if it's possible, if it's feasible. I know there's issues with turning equipment, that sort of thing, but I will point to some work, and if you need this citation, come up, talk to me. There's been work done in particular Saskatchewan, but also some in east central Alberta. And they took a bunch of farmers and said, we're going to count everything. So we're talking diesel fuel, seeding, fertilizer, time, and they had them run their farm differently for a couple of years, a couple different farms. And one of them, they were farming right through their wetlands or their wet spots. One of them, they were avoiding, and they went over years and they measured yields and then subtracted everything off and got their revenue out of it. And it was interesting. There's not a huge difference. The ones who left their wetlands did on books have a bit more profit. And just looking over years, but the question is then, that was I think 5 or 6 year study. Long term, if we're having problems with water and you can make as much money by leaving those wetlands there, is a potential in the future that you're going to have even a better chance of making profits? Something to consider anyhow. Like I said, I just think about water. You guys can think about the farming. So the last thing I wanted to go over again was this watershed concept. This landscape is so interconnected. So when I think about this, landscape and water, they're so interconnected, we can't separate them. It flows across the surface and gets to wetlands or rivers, and it can recharge the aquifer, move up and out, right? And what we're doing, particularly upstream of someone else, is so critical in determining what type of water and how much water they're going to get downstream, that we really need to think about it. And these wetlands, they're a tricky one, but suggest you look into them. They have some amazing values, like I said, like reduce the dry times, reduce the flooding in the spring. And if we can do something a bit more with that, or with shelter belts that keep the snow, those sort of wet spots across the landscape, I think we could do better as a whole watershed, not just on a field by field basis, as a whole watershed in having the water we need. Thank you.